Hello, this is Chris Parker, and I just had a conversation with Stef Cuisinier on the Business Simplicity podcast. And we unpacked I think, some pretty profound topics around organizational dynamics and got into some alternatives like sociocracy and holacracy. But for me, the joy was really going, looking at all of these different perspectives that are maybe driving us unconsciously on how we organize ourselves at work, and starting to discover that there are in fact better alternatives emerging. So hey, Stef, why would it be really valuable for people to listen to this conversation?
Well, I hope that I can inspire you a little bit with my thinking on how we could organize our teams and our organizations in ways that are economically successful, but also have positive impact on planet and on society. At the same time, creating happy people in them.
The Business Simplicity Podcast, where we learn about strategies and tactics to succeed through simplicity, with your host, Chris Parker.
And welcome back to the Business Simplicity Podcast. I'm Chris Parker and having a conversation with Stef Cuisinier, or Cuisinier, but in French it's Cuisinier. And God, I love that word. Maybe Stef will help us pronounce it better by the end of it. But Stef is a consultant, a coach on some things that I'm really interested in the area of dynamic organizations and team topologies. And I believe basically helping people work better together. And there's two times that I believe that I've been able to interact with Stef, both times inviting him into organizations to basically inspire and present and trigger some people to think differently about how they are organized and how they're working with each other, and what that means, and bringing organizational dynamics to the next level. So Stef, thank you for joining. I really appreciate it. Maybe after my introduction, can you share a little bit in your own words, what is it that you do?
Okay, first of all, happy to be here. So thanks for inviting me. What is it that I do? What I try to do is help organizations to improve on what their goals are. And I'm specifically interested in how they structure their teams and their organizations, because that's one of the topics that, well, for whatever reason, seems to be have taken my interest. I'm reading a lot about those kinds of questions. But apart from that, it's also about how people work together, how teams interact with each other, how leadership is organized. So many of those, I would say, organizational development topics are in my field of interest.
And how did you get there? So maybe take us on the journey um, from wherever you began, and how you ended up working with topics like this.
Yeah. Well, very short career summary is that I started as a developer, a COBOL developer, something like 25 or more years ago, I guess. And then I evolved into like technical and functional analysis jobs. And from there, somebody asked me to come over to the data center. So then I became sort of like an engineer. And first I was more like a Unix engineer, and then I became more like a project manager. And at that point in my career, because all of this happened in one company, which was quite large insurance company, but this got taken over by a very large bank, and I decided to leave. So I went to a startup, a very small startup, where I was the IT lead, the IT manager, but I was also the only ITer. So I did almost like everything. So we were 60 people when I arrived, and a year later we were 200. So it was growing exceptionally fast and was a great period. So I had to learn a lot of new skills. And this company evolved as well because it was joined together with other companies, and then at the end taken over by a large telecom giant in the US. So I ended up in a large telecom giant as a project manager, and as a team lead for project managers. And after 5 years, I decided to leave that large company because it didn't feel like a good fit with my DNA. It was just too big, I guess. And I started on my own. And because I had the skill of a project manager, that was the easy thing to do as a freelancer. But I noticed quite soon that I actually was more interested in organizational development, as I would call it, roles like agile coach or organizational coach, something like that. But of course, I didn't have any background in that area, although I had some background knowledge from my IT background in the other organizations. And so I told to the companies that connected me with customers that I wanted that kind of role. And one of those companies actually sent me to an interview, and I got the job. So that was really a bit of a surprise, but that's where I learned, of course, to do all my organizational development skills to apply them in practice. I was already reading about those topics for probably like a decade, but I had never been able to use any of that. And this was my first chance. And then we're talking about like 2018, something like that. And ever since then, I've been moving into roles which I would call organizational coaching roles.
Yeah. No, and the space that I'm particularly interested in wrestling with is the space between, call it the wider organization and leadership, and let's call leadership management, because I know leadership can be everywhere in an organization. It should be. And what I'm seeing, I'm curious if you agree with it, is from an operating model of a company, if that's people, process, and technology, maybe data in there as well. The technology obviously has, it just accelerated in its developments. Even process management, even from the lean days, coming into, the ability to automate process and to refine process and to make that much more efficient. But it seems like the people dimension, how people are organized, how they interact, which related to process, is really lagging behind. Like some of these methods that I know that you've been studying and applying that are still emerging. Why do you think that the human dimension, the people dimension of a company's operating model is the slowest to evolve, if you even agree with the statement?
Yes, it's a very interesting observation. I completely agree with the observation. And I believe there is a couple of reasons that I see as the possible causes for that. And one of the main reasons is the strength of, I would call, the mental model, which is the pyramid. So when we draw an organization, and when I draw something on a whiteboard which looks a little bit like a pyramid, people will immediately say it's an org chart. You're drawing an org chart. If you draw something with circles and they are linked to each other and it's more like a network, nobody will be knowing what you're actually trying to draw. So the strength of that mental model, where people at the bottom are doing things and people at the top are deciding things and people at the top are actually earning more and driving bigger cars and all those kind of things that are attached to that, which is a whole world, and also with a lot of economic incentives attached to it. That's a very strong model, and it is still the prevailing model in organizational thinking. While what we come across now in the knowledge world, and especially in the last decades, this model is not really helping us anymore in the way it did before. Because if the people at the bottom of the pyramid are not thinking as much as the people at the top, organizations don't function all that well anymore. So what people want today in organizations is that everybody contributes to the thinking and to the decision making, but the whole structure around that hasn't changed. It's still organized in a way that the people at the top of the pyramid are better off and that there are wrong incentives to get higher in the pyramid, even if it's not maybe your talent or your passion to be there. But that's the model. And as long as we keep that in place, it will be very difficult to let the human side evolve at the same pace as what the technology side and the process sides are actually doing for decades. That's my personal view on that. And I see some transformational consultancies try to work on that aspect as well, and they're really, really successful, but they are like very, very small. So you could say they are societal experiments today, but their results are extremely successful. So they are showing that by changing this mental model, you come to completely different kind of organizations with completely different people dynamics. But it takes everybody to be on board on that.
And
everybody.
Maybe unpack some of these alternatives, because I'm looking at your profile on Reboot, and if people would like to learn more about Stef and his work, you can find him on LinkedIn, and I'll put his LinkedIn link on the show notes, and also Reboot, which is RE-BOOT, reboot.be for Belgium. If you want it in English, you're gonna have to Google translate it, but that works just fine. And in there, there's Sociocracy 3.0, Holacracy, and something that's new to me, deep democracy, if that's being translated correctly. Are these some of these patterns that are, I guess, showing some promise for you? And how would you describe that type of approach without going into each individual method?
Yeah, what they have in common is that they describe patterns for human collaboration, which are not necessarily based on hierarchy or power relationships, but they are more based on equivalent relationships, or so where everybody can participate. And they still acknowledge, of course, that there is roles for there is still a necessity for people to coordinate activities where other people are probably not interested in doing the coordination. The question is, should we organize that in a way where the people that do more abstract and coordination type of work, should there be higher in something like the food chain than the people that actually do the work? Or could we think about this differently? And could this be like a rotation scheme, or could teams self-select their leaders or their representatives? So all those kinds of patterns, and then ways of making decisions together, you will find in those, I would call it pattern libraries, deep democracy, sociocracy, holacracy. So there are libraries of different organizational patterns, typically far less hierarchical than what you would see in the classical organizations.
And like you said, everyone needs to be involved, and I can imagine, because if one, well, actually, I know it, meaning there's a and it's not really going into sociocracy and holacracy, but one organization that I'm coaching, they are going pretty aggressively into cross-functional autonomous teams, but a la sort of an agile scrum model from their engineering tech space. But their business operational space are still hyper hierarchical, and they're bumping in, like their HR people are going nuts because their head office in Germany demands that they force everyone into a hierarchical structure for reporting, but the new model just doesn't compute, doesn't work, doesn't click. And so they're then having to start, doing all these other weird behaviors in order to, well, how do we represent a cross-functional circle into a a model which wants us to be, something else. So I can really imagine that everyone checking in. How, I'll bite, like, if people are struggling with a hierarchical model and they're open to explore something else, what tips would you give them? Like, where would you have them start?
Well, I would start by challenging their beliefs to figure out what it is that they really want to achieve with this. Because actually what I see happening in the transformation world is that most organizations are trying to transform to more, you could say, adaptable, versatile, agile structures or ways of working, but not necessarily because they believe that there is a better way of working together with people. in a lot of situations, they try to achieve or to go through those transformations to get quicker to the market or to save some costs. But that is a potential side effect. And if you're not willing to let go your own beliefs about the power relationships and about leadership and about how you take decisions together and how it will be difficult for you as a leader to make a decision purely on your own in this new structure, if that's for you very difficult to let go and you say, yeah, but at the end of the day, I still will be the decision maker and whatever you do underneath me in the organization is okay, but I will be the end decision maker, then not so much will change in the end. Because the labels will change and probably some team working will change. And within the teams, things might go quite well. But between the teams and outside of the teams, you still get the classical organization around it. And that's what you see actually in most, well, what is happening in most transformations. So they will not make the real leadership style shift at the same time.
Mm.
And they will, by the way, decide on those kind of transformations completely top down. So it will be a very small group of people that made the decision, we're going to do this transformation, and they will kind of enforce it to the rest of the organization. It's not like going to be a deep democratic debate in the organization on how could we organize ourselves better to be more productive and more successful.
You mean a transformation towards, for example, sociocracy would need to be a...
Even that, even when they say we're going to introduce a number of those concepts, then still in a lot of situations, it will be a decision from a very small group of people that say, you have to do this.
Yeah, I had a chance to have Brian Robertson of Holacracy on the conversation, and part of my research that I've also been able to join a Holacracy meeting with another company and observe that. Was wow, it's so fascinating. But one of the things with Holacracy that I find I believe is really nice is there's the concept of the constitution, meaning the traditional boss, if you will, literally signs away power. Could you call it power, control? Formally delegates that through a written constitution and embeds it into the organization. And as Brian shared, there's always, of course, that person can always revoke the constitution. So there's always a way out. But I think the fact that it's a formal, written, signed constitutional decision can make it very black and white. What do you think?
Indeed. Yeah, that to me, I'm a little bit familiar with the concept of the constitution. I like the idea that you formally make this decision to let go about the power. What I am a bit concerned about is that you say, but he can still revoke it at any time. What I see the most successful transformation organizations do is that they actually make sure that the whole ownership, like the board and the executive committee, they need to step in 100% before they actually start with a transformation, and then they make a proposal, and then they go to the whole staff, I mean everybody, and they require something like an 80% yes to start doing this, and then they get started. But that's a very high bar. That's not what most transformations will begin with. They will not ask the consent or the majority vote of most of the people, and they will not involve them in the decision making around that, which of course then create the extra challenge of you don't have their buy-in yet. You have decided something because you had some insight, and that's great, but that's just your insight at that point.
Yeah. So I know sometimes I struggle with it because a lot of times it's called the agile organizations that are frustrated with the business management as being the big obstacle. And I don't feel that's always fair or true, because management is dealing with sometimes different tensions, and they have a different context. But let's imagine that both management and, say, the organization were aware that things could be more human, could be a bit, more, there could be more flow in the organization. What would you do with that top management group to get to shift their mindset? Because obviously they have to be aware of that there's a problem. They have to be open for alternatives. And a CEO calls you and says, hey, Stef, we need to make a move here. Not really quite sure. Can you help my executive team discover the possibilities? What would that journey look like?
Interesting question. One of the things that I would coach them is in classical organizations, those people are actually trained they get a lot of questions and they need to provide the answers. One of the things they can change quite quickly is stop thinking that they need to be the answer to all the questions, and learning to work with their own teams and groups to actually give the power to the group to co-decide, and then they can still work out different stages in how the teams will get there. Because of course, if they're not used to this way of working, that might feel very uncomfortable as well in the beginning. But that is a very strong signal that I'm no longer gonna decide this on my own. You will be co-responsible, but you will also have a say in the decision. So if you're impacted, you will be at least consulted, and where it's possible, we will take into account what your opinion was. So that's definitely one of the things that the leadership teams can do. What they also can do is that extend their meetings. So if you have an executive committee with a very small group that typically take the top decisions, you can extend the group and say, actually, we can open this meeting up to, I don't know, anybody who wants to join, so that you create a level of transparency. It's not like everybody is going to show up in your executive meeting. Not everybody will be interested, but you create this openness, like there is nothing discussed here that should not be known by all of you. So and that might be a challenge for a lot of organizations, because maybe they have this non-transparent culture where a lot of actually is discussed behind closed doors, and not everybody should know all those things. And I know there is definitely confidentiality and other concerns there, but still you create the opportunity for people to start participating in the decision process. And what I've seen one large Belgian company do is that they have an executive committee, but around that they have a number of, you could say, middle managers that are a circle around that, and they actually are invited to all of those meetings of the executive committee. And what they see happening after, I don't know how much time that they experimented with this concept, is that they after a while, less and less the people of the executive committee actually have to speak in those meetings. So they already evolved to a place or to a situation where the people, you could say, at one level or two levels below them in the organizations, are having the discussions. They are still there. The executives are still there, but they are no longer there seen as, yeah, but at the end of the meeting, he or she will take the decision anyway, so why should we bother? So they have learned to step back and see what happens. Obviously, that also creates some challenges for them, because then you have to ask yourself, what's my role still here? But I'm convinced that there is always enough to be concerned about, and you can actually create so much more support in your organization if you start with those kinds of experiments. And that's just a step towards more, I would say, participative decision making.
I can imagine there's a big shift for the others as well, because you highlighted some major shifts of mindset for call it the executives. But if the executives are sharing those responsibilities with others, then others need to be ready to take those responsibilities. Because I think that's something I see a lot in organizations, is people pointing fingers at executives and saying, well, you're not making decisions fast enough. And then actually, if it comes back and they say, well, why don't you just make the decision? Then the whole, the context changes. Like, oh, wait, that,
Yeah.
these are actually complex, difficult decisions. Yeah, they are. So
absolutely.
have fun
And
with it.
Yeah, and they're complex for everybody, indeed. And of course, one of the I would say hesitations in those kind of change trajectories is that for people not used to being empowered and take decisions, it might feel really uncomfortable having all that responsibility, because all of a sudden you can't split the freedom to co-decide and the responsibility for the decision. So in a classical organization, many people can say it wasn't my decision. I wasn't there. It was the boss who decided whatever. So that works quite well. And that feels comfortable. They know a lot of things don't go their way or go wrong, but it's not their responsibility because somebody else decided it. And of course, that kind of comfortable feeling goes away when you go to a more participative way of deciding. But what I've learned also is that if you take the time to explain to people and to let them experience what the advantages are, because of course you can impact your own future, you can co-decide on your own future and on every aspect of your own future, also financial aspects and whatever. I mean, all of it that happens in the organization, that you will feel much more committed to the outcomes because you were there and you were involved in the decision making. It's no longer somebody else who decided something that you are half disagreeing with.
I'm wondering, what is the end outcome of this? Meaning, I can imagine, business results. Oh wait, in the in this time of humanity that we're in, where things are, call it very disruptive, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, that an ability for an organization to sense and respond quicker with the people closer to the problems, making the best decisions, as opposed to delegating that all the way up. So I think speed, quality, business results, but more, I'm not sure if it's more important to me, but at least equally important to me is the human condition. Because it feels to me like this would be much more satisfying, more fun, more engaging, for people who are spending, most of the time of their day at work. Isn't this just a nicer way to live?
Absolutely. I'm convinced organizations that do that, and there are quite a number that already work that way, what they see is that there is a lot, they have much better retention numbers. Typically also, they don't fire people when the numbers go bad. They will co-decide on what to do. And I've seen companies do that really well as well. And then you see, you get a completely different way of thinking about working together as a team, and contributing to something that actually matters to you, but contributing really in a way that you feel that your voice is heard and you have impact on whatever happens in the organization. And it's not something that you undergo or that is decided at someplace else. So is it for everybody? I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that for most people, it will lead to happier lives and much more engagement towards the organization.
I guess less stress, and again, not being a stress expert, I can be sometimes an expert of being stressed, but that stress and the risk of burnout has a lot to do with just just overwhelm and volume of work, but also the person's feeling of being able to influence their environment, because it can be very stressful for people who believe they have no options, no scenarios out. They can't influence the environment, so decisions are being taken upon them, and they don't have a social structure either at work or outside of work. And if you have a perfect storm of negativity there, then burnout was almost certainly. And it sounds to me like this is collective. It's a social dynamic. People are definitely able to have influence. Probably the decisions of what types of work and volumes of work that they can handle are part of that. Why wouldn't an organization do this? This all sounds like magical Kool-Aid. If we're talking, maybe what organization would you say that this wouldn't be perfect for?
there are none. But the challenge is that it is, like I said, it's the strength of the prevailing mental model. We are still growing up in a world where people that are good at abstract thinking, the people that have degrees, people that have whatever. I mean, the whole social status thing around it, that they feel like they are probably better decision makers than the people that are carrying out manual labor. So the interesting thing is that one of the original cases that I've been looking into a Spanish company, Irizar, which is actually in the automotive industry, and they're completely reorganized themselves in a way as I just explained, so a very participative way. But they're not a white collar company. They are like in the automotive, they're making spare parts for other car companies. And so even in that kind of a context where many of the people are blue collar, they're all co-decided on everything, on the financial future of the company, of the strategic direction of everything, the working hours. I mean, everything is co-decided. That's the way they work. They operate completely like that. And financially, they're very successful. And there's a number of cases like that. So it's not a matter of, is this not working for some type of organizations? No, we're just hesitant to try it. And of course, we need to let go a lot of our own beliefs about how the world or leadership and things like that work. That is true.
I don't know. I blame Milton Friedman. meaning that bastard. Okay, yeah. So he's an economist, a super wise man, I'm sure, but he's the one who's credited with the the statement that businesses exist to increase shareholder value. I know it's more refined than that, but that's basically the outcome. And what if Friedman would have said, something like comma, and to create the best possible living conditions for people, or something like that. I think MBA business schools would the textbooks would be different.
Yeah, but we are evolving
Yeah.
in that direction, I would say, because what you see, everything people call this day triple bottom line, and things like that. So we want to do the right thing. Of course, private enterprises are there to make some money. If they are not financially sound, they won't survive either. But it's not enough as a purpose. If they are not having a positive impact on the world, they have a purpose problem, and that impact is societal. I mean, on people and also on the planet, and it's all those aspects that need to be aligned with each other. It's no longer a game of, if you're just making money, we're all fine. And those companies are still there's still a lot of companies like that, and they are still successful, but they will struggle, in my opinion, in the future, because that model is actually the model that, and you refer to Milton Friedman, that also created all what we call the externalities and all the collateral damage to the planet and to people. Because in that model, it's okay to use low-cost labor in other countries or to destroy the environment while you're making good money. And that is, of course, something that we can't keep doing.
Money is important, but it's as you say it that way, it's like, wait a second, we are literally destroying the planet so someone can have more of something so abstract as the concept of money. Our children's children are going to look back with some fascination. What the hell were we thinking? And there is a shift going on. So for me, there's a business transactional dimension of work, so that the shareholder value, the revenue, performance. There's also a relational dimension, so that the people working with each other at the company, also the customers, and also the ecosystem, so the impact on society. And but for me, there's also an internal drive, so sort of the people who, I think every person has an innate value and a desire to do their thing, to live their life and explore the world and learn and grow. And in the process of learning and growing, of course, that means making mistakes and doing foolish things and getting, a scrape on your knee every once in a while. And then, of course, then becoming more wise over time, and hopefully then, imparting that gift. For me, all of that, what you call magic, I don't know, all of that all of that is what I look for in business, because it can all be there. It's already there. We just don't really put a spotlight on it that way. And I hope we continue to make that shift.
Completely agree. Couldn't have said it better. So yeah.
For some reason, I was hoping you would disagree. Like, no.
No, but what I want to add to that is that many people still see that as a potential conflict. Yeah, we're still living in a world where it seems that you need to choose, like, either you're gonna make a lot of money and then you're probably gonna do bad things for the world and for people, or you're gonna be a happy person and doing good things for the world, but then probably you're not gonna make all that much money. So, but that is a false. For me, it's a false paradox. We need to learn to think about it's and. Yes, we can do good things for the planet and good things for people and still have a very comfortable living. That's perfectly possible. And many organizations are actually already proving that. But it is still easier to make more money by creating some damage. That is also true. So let's go for the little bit more challenging, but much more rewarding way of thinking about that. Easier. And not a conflict way.
Yeah, easier. I've been kicking around a little bit a while ago, but I've dropped the term. But this whole easier part, because what emerged in me was the concept of lazy management versus love management. And again, I'm overusing the word love too many times, but it seems like it requires less commitment, vulnerability, connection for a manager to show up and simply manage people by performance metrics at a distance from a dashboard. It makes it too easy to abstract away the human condition. And I believe that that person also suffers, meaning doing it the lazy way or the easy way, making money without considering the impact on society, will also damage that person. So I think there's also a dimension of just self-care of, no, show up,
it's definitely less rewarding.
Yeah. Just show up. Love it. So, Stef, any last comments or questions or anything that's alive in you that you'd like to unpack a little bit before we wrap up?
I wanted to maybe go back 1 second to what you called the shareholder model, because that's also one of my insights, is that the whole shareholder model that's another organizational concept which is very, very strong in our economy. But what it does is it splits actually the responsibility for funding an organization from the responsibility to run it. So the executives are running it, and the board and the owners are the shareholders. But what that does with many organizations is that actually those shareholders, they are like pension funds, they are like institutional investors, but they are not committed into the purpose of the company. They are committed in making a return for their investors. And that is a problem, because that way you create wrong incentives. So I believe that that companies are not meant to create shareholder value only, and especially not in a context where the shareholders are anonymous investors who are actually just looking for a quick return, and they will quickly reinvest in another company if the return in your company is not high enough. That's actually a false model, and it creates a problem. Just like the hierarchy and the pyramid, this is also a puzzle we need to solve. And so what you see organizations do, that's the whole world of cooperatives, but also where some transformed organizations say that like a certain percentage, I hear sometimes the number of 30% of the profit will be redistributed among all people that work in the company, always. And then the impact of the shareholders will be smaller. They're still impactful, but at least there is more split, or I would say more distribution of the wealth among everybody and not among the people that actually took the risk to invest the money, which is very valuable and we need them, but it's not enough. And it's only a part of the contribution that we need in organizations.
Yeah. I guess there's these dilemmas up and down the chains of an organization, and what I love about speaking with you and the work that you're doing is you're looking at these different levels of the dynamics and seeing how, what's contributing to what effect, and are we conscious and are we aware of the effect that these unconscious decisions are making. So it's well, I've certainly benefited, the two times that we've been a bit more formally working together, that you're able to inspire and engage two different teams that I was working with. And I would definitely invite people that if they're looking to explore some new, just alternative ways of looking at the business world that is still, returning a profit, hitting your performance goals, and is more supportive of the humanity within your organization and also with your customers and society. And for me, very important is the relation of everyone with themselves, meaning, are people satisfied? Are they comfortable? Are they comfortable in their skin? Are they having fun, in life? Is it contributing or taking away from their life? Well, then reach out to Stef. Again, I'm gonna I call him Cuisinier, but just before we started recording, he corrected me that it's should be in French, so it's Cuisinier, and that's Stef. I hit it that time. I butchered it the first time. And you can find him on LinkedIn at Stef. It's spelled out Cuisinier, so it's a Cuisinier, or at Reboot, re-boot.be. Prepared to be inspired.
Thanks for the talk, Chris. It's really interesting.
Always a pleasure with you, Stef. Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Visit ebullient.com to download the Simple Business Design Framework. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player.